They did not truly feel your loss the day you walked out of their door. They felt it the day your spirit stopped orbiting them. And that difference matters more than anything, because for the longest time your body might have been the one in the relationship, but it was your energy that kept it alive, your good morning messages, your check-ins when they went quiet, your long explanations after every misunderstanding, your softness after every shutdown, your willingness to be the emotional bridge, no matter how many times they burned it. And when an avoidant person is used to that kind of devotion, they can fool themselves into believing you will always be there. Even when you are exhausted, even when you cry to sleep, even when you say you're done, because done never came with sustained distance. It came with another round of trying. So in their mind your presence was permanent. They might have taken a break, flirted with other people, drowned themselves in work, numbed out with distractions. But in the background there was always a quiet assumption: you'll be there if I reach out, you'll pick up if I call, you'll reply if I test the waters, and that assumption is exactly what kept them from seeing who you really were. They were not measuring the depth of your love, they were consuming it. And then one day something shifted that they did not expect. You didn't just step back physically, you unplugged energetically. You stopped rehearsing the argument in your head. You stopped checking if they were online. You stopped stalking their stories and trying to decode their captions. You stopped writing messages in your notes, just in case. You stopped acting like their silence was a cliffhanger and started treating it like a chapter that had closed. And that is the day the story changed, because avoidant people don't feel the true impact of a loss when the body leaves. They feel it when the emotional supply dries up, when the person they were used to leaning on, complaining to, venting to, double texting for validation, suddenly becomes emotionally neutral, polite maybe, kind even, but no longer hooked. And that neutrality is deafening. At first they might rationalize it. They tell themselves you're being dramatic. You'll cool down. You've said, I'm done. Before, they minimize it to protect their ego, but somewhere in their body something feels different. The energetic door that used to always be cracked open is quietly shut. No announcement, no fireworks, just shut. And then small things begin to hit them. They scroll back through old chats, and there is a sinking feeling: how much you held, how much you understood, how often you said, "It's okay, I get you," even when your needs weren't met. And now there is no new message above those memories, no fresh proof that you are still available to carry the weight. Then they feel it when someone else tries to care for them, but doesn't have your emotional depth, your patience, your way of turning their chaos into something that made sense. They realize not everyone will stretch themselves the way you did. Not everyone will choose to stay when it's hard. They feel it in the silence between distractions. When their phone is finally face down and there is no new notification from you, the one they assumed would always circle back. They didn't realize how much your energy regulated them, how your check-ins softened their loneliness, how your reassurance calmed the fear they never admitted, until it stopped. And this is the part you need to understand deeply. Their realization now is not creating your value, it is only revealing it. You were that powerful, that rare, that devoted long before they woke up. But their nervous system was too busy protecting itself from closeness to fully see what was in front of them. Only in your energetic absence do they have to sit with their own patterns without you cushioning the impact. Only now do they have to taste what it actually feels like when someone exceptional decides, I love you, but I will no longer abandon myself for you. And if they are honest with themselves, that is the moment the word ordinary dies in their mind, Because ordinary doesn't keep showing up after being hurt. Ordinary doesn't love through confusion. Ordinary doesn't stay long after the easy option was to cut ties. Ordinary doesn't walk away quietly with dignity. Instead of creating drama, they realize your love wasn't common. Your presence wasn't replaceable. Your emotional labor wasn't standard. But here is the most important part. This awakening in them is not an instruction for you to rush back and resume the old role. It is simply proof that when you pulled your energy back to yourself, you didn't just lose a relationship. You gained the clearest mirror of your own worth, the worth that was there the whole time, waiting for you to stop pouring it into someone who could only see it once it was gone. You didn't stop loving them. You stopped abandoning yourself to keep them, and that is a very different story from the one your pain tries to tell you at 2 a.m. For a long time, love for you meant stretching past your limits, justifying what hurt, making excuses for their distance, and calling it understanding. You told yourself they were scared, overwhelmed, traumatized, emotionally blocked, and you weren't wrong. But somewhere along the way, their fear became more important than your peace. Their triggers became more important than your needs, and their pace became more important than your heart. You thought you were being loyal, but what you were really doing was walking further and further away from yourself just to stay within reach of them. Self-abandonment doesn't start loudly, it starts quietly. It begins the first time you feel a knot in your chest after they go cold and you tell yourself, "It's not a big deal. I don't want to be dramatic." It continues when they ignore a message for hours or days, and you respond with understanding instead of honesty. "No worries, I know you're busy." Even though what you really feel is neglected, you lower your voice around your own truth. You start editing your needs, shrinking your expectations, twisting yourself into the most unproblematic version possible so you don't scare them away. And every time you abandon how you truly feel to keep them comfortable, you take one step further from your own center. There is a moment in every avoidant, anxious dynamic where the relationship stops being about two people and starts being about one person's fear and the other person's willingness to manage it. You became the manager. You learned how to speak gently when you were hurting. You learned how to calm them down when they felt pressured. You learned how to communicate in ways that wouldn't make them shut down. You walked carefully around their sensitivities while no one walked around yours. And because your love is deep, you kept doing it. You told yourself, "They didn't have what I had. They didn't learn what I learned. I can hold more. I can carry this." You were not wrong about your capacity. You were wrong about the idea that your capacity had to be used to protect everyone but you. The turning point wasn't the day you stopped loving them. You may still love them. You may always care. The turning point was the day you realized the price you were paying to keep them close was your own emotional safety. Your body started screaming what your mind had been trying to negotiate away: the anxiety, the tight chest, the feeling of chasing, the exhaustion that hit you after every conflict, the way you stopped recognizing yourself in the mirror. Not because your face changed, but because your eyes were tired from always scanning the horizon of, "Are we okay?" You realized love had turned into hypervigilance. That's not romance. That's survival. So you did something that felt wrong at first, but was deeply right. You stopped abandoning yourself. You stopped resenting the message they ignored. You stopped apologizing just to restore harmony. You stopped saying, "It's fine," when it wasn't. You stopped letting their avoidance dictate the temperature of your nervous system. You stopped calling them every time you felt that familiar ache of panic. You sat with your feelings instead of running back to the person who triggered them. You didn't switch your love off like a light. You redirected it back into the person who had gone neglected for too long, you. And that shift can feel brutal because your brain is used to reading abandonment as love and boundaries as loss. When you don't rush to fix things, it can feel like you're being cold. When you don't chase, it can feel like you're giving up. When you don't explain your heart for the 10th time, it can feel like you're being unfair. But look deeper. You are not cutting them off from love, you are cutting them off from access to you that costs you your self-respect. You are not punishing them, you are finally protecting you. You didn't stop caring. You just stopped contorting. You stopped treating your needs like a problem that had to be solved privately, so you didn't inconvenience them. You stopped carrying the entire emotional weight of the relationship while telling yourself, at least they're still here. You understood that having them physically present while you are emotionally disappearing is not a win. You understood that staying with someone while abandoning yourself is not loyalty. It's slow self-destruction. Love that demands you betray yourself is not love that will sustain you. And somewhere, deep inside, you finally realized that. You realized your heart deserves a home, where it doesn't have to fight for basic recognition. You realized you could miss them, and still choose yourself. You realized letting go of self-abandonment might cost you the version of them you held onto in your mind, but it would give you back the version of you that has been waiting to breathe freely. So no, you did not stop loving them. You simply stopped making their comfort the altar where your own needs go to die. You chose the harder, braver version of love. The kind where you keep your heart open to possibility, but closed to patterns that erase you. You chose what was always quietly calling you, a life where you belong fully to yourself first, so that anyone who wants to walk beside you has to meet you there, not drag you away from it. Their delayed realization doesn't upgrade your worth, it only reveals what was always there, and if you really let that sink into your bones, your entire story with this avoidant X starts to look different, because for so long your mind has been quietly running a script that says, if they finally realize, then I'll finally feel enough. If they finally regret losing me, then it proves I was special. But that script is a lie. Your worth was never pending their awareness. It was never under review in their nervous system. It was never sitting in a waiting room inside their avoidance. It existed before they met you. It existed while they were taking you for granted. And it exists now, whether they wake up to it or not. And that is the truth your heart has to come home to if you want real healing instead of just emotional revenge. Think about how you showed up in that relationship. You loved them through their confusion. You tried to understand their wounds. You gave them patience when you were the one bleeding. You explained your side gently when you could have exploded. You offered so many chances for them to step into something deeper and safer. You carried the emotional weight. When they disappeared into their cave, you stayed when many people would have walked away at the first sign of hot and cold. That wasn't ordinary behavior. That was you living from a deep well of heart, empathy, loyalty. That was your worth in motion, not their perception of you. Your value wasn't created when they left, and it won't be created when they suddenly realize. Wow. I lost something incredible. That realization is not a promotion for you, it's a delayed report of a fact that was already true. The avoidant mind often runs on delay. They feel after, not during. They understand impact after distance, not in the moment. When you were there, your love was like air, always available, invisible, easy to ignore until it's gone. When you left emotionally, when your energy stopped flowing toward them like a constant river, then the outline of what you actually were in their life became clear. It's like turning off the lights in a room and suddenly seeing the glow of what used to be taken for granted. But here's the key. The glow was always there. They were just too defended, too distracted, too stuck in their own fear to fully see it. So when they finally message you saying, "I didn't realize what I had," or "Nobody has loved me like you did," those words are not an upgrade to your value. They are a confession of their previous blindness. If you attach your worth to their awakening, you stay chained to their capacity. On the days they are aware and sentimental, you feel high. On the days they are numb and distant, you feel low. That is no way to live. That is handing your self-esteem to someone whose entire struggle is inconsistency. You cannot build self-worth on top of someone else's delayed clarity, because their timing is about their trauma, their avoidance, their processing speed, not about your intrinsic value. Your worth is a constant, their realization is a variable. And when you separate those two, you stop treating their regret like a medal you finally earned. You also have to be brutally honest about this. There were days they falsely downgraded you in their mind. They told themselves you were too sensitive, too much, too emotional, too needy. They minimized your needs to make their avoidance feel justified. They framed you as the problem, so they didn't have to confront their own patterns. None of that made you less. It just revealed the limits of their emotional maturity at that time. In the same way, when they now place you on a pedestal in hindsight, that doesn't suddenly make you more. It just shows they're finally seeing a fuller picture. Their opinion of you has always been filtered through their state, not through objective truth. The real power move is that you decide your worth is not a stock price that rises when someone regrets losing you and falls when they take you for granted. You decide your worth is a fixed baseline, rooted in how you love, how you choose, how you grow, how you treat yourself. You allow their delayed realization to be information, not validation. You can feel a little bittersweet satisfaction. You can acknowledge, yes, I was rare, and now you see it. But you don't let that become the reason you finally respect yourself, because if you do, you'll still be outsourcing your sense of value to someone who might forget again, dissociate again, shut down again. So when your avoidant ex suddenly wakes up and realizes you're not ordinary, let that confirm what you already decided about yourself, not convince you of something new. Let it be proof that your intuition about your own heart was right from the beginning. The real story was never, "Look, I must be special because they came back." The real story is, "I was special even when they couldn't show up, even when they mishandled me, even when they didn't have the tools to meet me. And I choose now to live like that's true, with or without them." Their delayed realization is their lesson. Your enduring worth is your foundation, and you're allowed to build your next chapter on that, not on them finally catching up to what your soul has known all along. Your emotional detachment is not coldness. It is recovery of your dignity and identity, and you need to stop confusing the two, because for so long you wired yourself to believe that being a good, loving, loyal person meant staying emotionally available no matter how you were treated, no matter how many times they went silent, no matter how many times your needs were minimized and your feelings were dismissed. You taught yourself that love meant being understanding, even when you were being neglected. So the first time you stop reacting, the first time you don't send the long paragraph, the first time you feel the urge to chase and you breathe instead, it can feel like you're becoming a colder version of yourself. But you are not. You are becoming a more protected version of yourself, a version who loves deeply without volunteering for constant self-betrayal. Emotional detachment in this context doesn't mean you no longer care. It means you no longer collapse. It means their messages don't immediately dictate your mood. It means their silence doesn't automatically launch you into panic. It means you have created enough space inside yourself that their inconsistency no longer has direct access to your nervous system. You might still feel sadness, nostalgia, anger, tenderness. You are still human, but those feelings no longer control your behavior. They don't drag you back into patterns you've already outgrown. Detachment is not the death of your heart. It is the end of your heart being on a leash. Think about who you became in that relationship. You adjusted your tone, your timing, your honesty to avoid triggering their shutdown. You swallowed words that needed to be said because you were afraid they would disappear again. You downplayed your hurt so you wouldn't be labeled too much. You stayed available even after they ignored you for days. You answered short, dry texts with warmth and depth. You stitched the connection together over and over while pretending you were okay with how little they met you in the middle. That is not neutrality, that is emotional overextension. Your identity slowly shifted from, I am a whole person, to, I am the one who loves them enough to stay through anything. And while perseverance is beautiful, it becomes destructive when it's used against you. When your loyalty becomes the reason someone never has to grow, emotional detachment is you stepping back from that role. Not because you hate them, but because you finally see what it's been costing you. When you detach, you stop rehearsing conversations that may never happen. You stop stalking every tiny sign of their life and turning it into a prophecy about whether they still care. You stop running rescue missions in your mind, imagining what you could say or do to finally unlock their potential. The obsession begins to quiet, and in that quiet you start to hear your own voice again. Not the voice that begs, not the voice that rationalizes, but the voice that says, I am exhausted. I am worthy of more than this confusion. I miss them, but I miss myself too. That voice is your identity calling you back home. Emotional detachment is you answering that call. It is you choosing to step out of the emotional fog and stand somewhere clear, even if that clarity hurts at first, because at least it is honest. At least it does not require you to keep editing yourself down to fit inside someone else's unhealed story. People might misread your shift. Your avoidant ex might even tell themselves, they've gone cold, they never really cared. They moved on so fast. But that is their interpretation, filtered through their own guilt and defenses. What they cannot see is the nights you cried, the days you stared at your phone, the times you almost broke your own boundary to send that one last message. What they cannot see is how hard you fought for the relationship before you ever let go. Detachment is not sudden. It is built one painful realization at a time, realization that your needs are not outrageous, realization that you cannot single-handedly fix someone's fear of intimacy, realization that love without reciprocity is a slow drain, realization that your nervous system is not built to live in constant survival mode for someone who calls it just how I am. When those realizations stack up, your spirit doesn't become cold, it becomes tired of lying to itself. And the distance you create is not cruelty, it is honesty. Your dignity returns every time you choose not to argue with mixed signals, every time you choose not to defend your worth to someone who already knows it, but refuses to honor it, every time you choose not to respond to a breadcrumb as if it were a full meal, every time you choose to sit with your feelings, instead of outsourcing yourself, soothing to the person who keeps causing the hurt, you begin to remember, I am not here to audition, I am not here to convince, I am not here to keep proving that I am worthy of consistent love. Your detachment is you stepping out of the audition room and realizing you were never supposed to be there in the first place. You were supposed to be on the other side of the table too, evaluating whether this person actually has the emotional capacity to walk beside you. Emotional detachment is also how your identity separates from the role of the one who loves them enough to stay through anything. Because that role sounds romantic, but it is dangerous if it becomes your entire self. Who are you outside of being the understanding one, the patient one, the forgiving one? Who are you when you're not in recovery mode from their last withdrawal? Who are you when you're not scanning their mood, their social media, their words for clues? Detachment gives you the space to rediscover that. Maybe you were creative before the relationship took over your thoughts. Maybe you were ambitious, social, funny, spontaneous. Maybe you had goals, habits, dreams that got pushed aside while you were busy studying attachment theory videos at 3 a.m., trying to decode this person's behavior. When you detach, your identity starts to expand again. You become more than someone's almost, someone's option, someone's emotional therapist. You remember that you are also your own main character. So no, this isn't you becoming heartless. This is you refusing to keep your heart in a place where it is mishandled. This is you understanding that love without self-respect is not sustainable. This is you realizing that your warmth is a gift that must be secured, not a light left on in an empty house for someone who keeps walking in and out at odd hours. Your emotional detachment is the moment you lock the door not out of spite, but out of self-preservation. And if they ever come back, trying to convince you that you've changed, that you're different now, you can look at your reflection and know the truth. You didn't become less loving. You became less willing to sacrifice your identity to keep a love that kept refusing to fully choose you. A comeback is meaningless without consistency, accountability, and real emotional growth. And this is where you have to get brutally honest with yourself, because your heart has been trained to treat their return as the miracle, the proof, the long-awaited sign that this time it will be different. But a return by itself is just a moment, not a transformation. Anyone can miss you, anyone can feel lonely, anyone can feel a wave of regret at 1 a.m. and send a message. That doesn't mean they've developed the emotional muscles required to love you safely. So if you're not careful, you end up worshiping the fact that they came back while ignoring the reality of how they behave once they're back. And that is how the cycle repeats, different round, same pattern, more broken pieces for you to pick up. Consistency is the first test of whether this comeback is real or just another emotional spike. Real change doesn't show up in one intense conversation or one perfect apology. It shows up in what they do on the boring days. On the triggered days, on the busy days, it shows up in whether they can stay present instead of disappearing the moment intimacy feels heavy again. It shows up in whether they text you only when they're lonely or regularly, because you're now part of their life rhythm. It shows up in whether they keep their word without you chasing, reminding, or begging. If their energy is hot when they're scared of losing you and cold once you relax, that's not consistency. That's self-protection disguised as romance, and you deserve more than being someone's emotional safety net when they feel empty. Accountability is the second pillar, and it's the one most people avoid because it forces both of you to face what actually happened. Not just how much you miss each other. Accountability means they don't rewrite the past to make themselves the victim. They don't say, "We both made mistakes," as a way to blur the very clear pattern that hurt you. They don't minimize your pain with, "I didn't mean it that way," or "You're too sensitive." Instead, they can say the hard sentences cleanly. "I know I pulled away when you needed me. I know I disappeared instead of talking to you. I know I made you feel like you were asking for too much when you were asking for the basics." Accountability means they let the truth land without deflecting. defending or flipping it back on you, and then they ask, "What do you need to feel safe with me now?" If they come back and act like nothing happened, if they slide in with jokes and flirting and nostalgia but never touch the scar, they're not rebuilding, they're resurfacing. They're asking you to act like history doesn't matter as long as the chemistry is still there. But love without accountability is like a house built on sand. It might stand in good weather, but the first emotional storm will knock it down. And then there is real emotional growth, the piece that takes time and humility. Growth means they didn't just suffer without you. They learned without you. They didn't just miss your presence. They reflected on their patterns. They sat with their discomfort instead of numbing it with distractions. They started understanding their avoidant triggers. Maybe they began therapy. Maybe they read. Maybe they talked honestly with someone they trust. Maybe they finally stopped blaming every ex and started asking, "What do I keep doing when people get close?" Emotional growth shows up in new behavior in familiar situations, where before they would shut down, now they say, "I'm overwhelmed. Can we slow down but not disconnect?" Where before they would ghost, now they say, "I need a bit of space, but I'll check in tomorrow." Where before they would get defensive, now they say, "You're right. That wasn't fair." If they come back, but still handle conflict with silence, still treat your needs as pressure, still rely on you to initiate every repair, then what you have is a recycled dynamic dressed up in new words, not a healed bond. You need to remember that your job is no longer to be impressed they returned. Your job is to observe whether their return is supported by rhythm, responsibility, and real inner work. And if it's not, you are allowed to say, "I believe you care about me, but caring is not enough. I need consistent, accountable, grown-up love." Because you did not go through all that pain just to take them back at the same level they left. You didn't rebuild yourself, respect just to hand it back to the same version of them that broke it. A comeback is only meaningful if it comes with a new pattern. Otherwise, it's just a replay of an old story that you've already survived once, and your future is too important to keep using it as a rerun screen for someone else's unfinished growth.